Okay, lovely. Remember to interrupt me with
Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Professor Tim Connell, who is an honorary life fellow of the Gresham College, an emeritus foundation professor from City University, where he sat on Senate for many years. He's also a graduate of Oxford, Liverpool, and London universities, and has studied in Spain and Mexico. Tim holds the degree of Doctor of Letters from City University of London. Since 2006, he has been chairman of the Gresham Society, which supports the Gresham College. Tim is also a freeman of the City of London and sits on the court of the Stationers' Company. Tim, good to see you.
Yes, welcome. How are you doing, Tony?
I'm doing well, but I think we'd better tell the audience that you had a bit of an accident the other day. So you are sort of doing this for me very kindly under slightly difficult circumstances.
Well, yes, I could have made life easier for myself. I tripped over a matchstick and managed to break a vertebra. But thanks to the National Health, here I am sitting with a scarf around my neck, hiding my neck brace, which I'll be wearing for the next couple of months, but never mind. I always say to myself, it could have been worse.
Absolutely. Anyway, it's good to have you with us. We're going to be talking about the life of Thomas Gresham and how it all progressed coming through to the 21st century. But first of all, can you give us a bit of information on Thomas Gresham, who I suppose was a very early philanthropist?
Well, yes, the interesting thing about Thomas Gresham, that yes, he was a philanthropist. He was also a diplomat, a spy, a gun runner, and a money launderer. In fact, he's the kind of chap we need in the City of London today. He actually came from a long-standing Norfolk family, very interesting background for East Anglia, and his family was senior players in the City of London. His father had been mayor, and both the father and uncle had been masters of the Mercers Company, which was and is the leading livery company in the City of London. And all of this history, even right up to today, does involve the livery companies in a very big way. Now, Thomas, good city lad, went to St Paul's School, another Mercers foundation, in the City of London. He went on to Cambridge, but the slight mystery is he only stayed for a term or two. Now, the official history will tell you that this was because he was recalled to help his father with his business in the City of London. But given how rich the family was, I think the alternative story is far preferable, that he got chucked out because he wasn't behaving himself. The key point, the key point in the history is that at the time, if you wanted a education, you had to send your children either to Oxford or Cambridge. You couldn't go anywhere in London. And this is where the idea of the third university in England comes from, because in many ways, in England, not Scotland, whose universities go back much further, but in many ways, Gresham had this university idea, and in the sense of universal, firstly because he wanted to introduce the new learning. Up until then, education had been focused very much indeed on the classics, as indeed they were right up to the 20th century. And this was a time of massive commercial expansion in London. So it's not surprising that he wanted subjects like astronomy for navigation, geometry, meaning mathematics, again for navigation, and of course all sorts of developments were going on in the field of medicine. So he introduced the chair of what he called then, and is still called today to confuse people, physics. Now, commercially, he did very well. At the age of 24, he became a mercer. He started going to the Low Countries to trade, firstly on behalf of the family, then on his own accord. And we need to remember that the largest port in Northern Europe at the time was Antwerp. And this was only a 2-day sail across the North Sea, up the shallows of the Scheldt estuary, and through a sea which was beset by pirates. Apart from that, it's a fairly straightforward journey. The key thing at the time with English trade to the continent was wool. Very hard for us to imagine till you see those massive wool churches in places like Norfolk and Gloucestershire to realise how valuable this trade was right the way through the Middle Ages. And because Antwerp was such a big trading centre, Gresham then found himself buying and selling on behalf of other people. For Lord Cecil, for example, he provided marble pillars for his new stately home. So there was sort of no ending to it. But the thing was, he got a very early introduction to the multiple currencies which were in use across Europe. And I would think he was the first man to realise you could trade currencies between each other, the original foreign exchange. And he did so well at this, under Edward VI, he actually managed to reduce the king's debts, and the debts of the English crown could be massive, especially under Edward VIII. And he reduced these to almost nothing, to the extent that he served all four Tudor monarchs without losing his head. And in the 16th century, that was an achievement in
That was an
itself.
achievement, wasn't it?
Well, it was quite funny, really, but they got rid of him once or twice. Queen Mary, obviously, with a change of faith. One of the others was slightly concerned about what was really going on over there. And they sent different people to replace Gresham, who lasted very little time at all. And they realized that, as one American president said, he might be a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch. And he really was the man who drove the English economy through much of the 16th century.
So, have you any idea what his fortune would be worth in today's terms?
Oh,
It's
you
got
know
to
that
be.
famous line, if you have to ask the price, you can't afford it. He went on, I think he had 80 properties across England.
Yeah.
He had his own building where Bishopsgate, where Tower 42 is today. Gosh, the only thing was his latest biographer, excellent book by John Guy, called Gresham's Law, available in all good bookshops. He calculated that at the end of Gresham's life, because of course he died, he fell over in the kitchen, had a stroke, dead. So he wasn't expecting to go at that point, though thank goodness he had written a will for Gresham College. And it turned out that he had more bills owing than he had actually had money coming in. And of course, he was very good at screwing money out of people, and his descendants weren't. So, how much money Gresham really had at the end is a very interesting question.
Because we hear about the endowment. Now, is the endowment money, or is the endowment the property and the general concept of stuff that he left behind, as it were?
Well, the interesting thing is, of course, his great legacies are the Royal Exchange and really the present Gresham College. Both buildings went through various iterations because of the Great Fire of London, this, that, and the other. Gresham College, at one point, the property was sold off, and the college existed only in the sense that it went and gave lectures in different places, including the Royal Exchange, oddly enough. But the key thing really was the fact that Antwerp had a proper, what they called the Bourse. It was an exchange for merchants to meet. It looked very much like an Oxbridge College with colonnades, and the merchants would meet out of the rain under these colonnades. And at the time, merchants in London were meeting in the street with all the noise and the mess that would entail. So Gresham wanted an Antwerp Bourse in London. Now, there were several factors in this. One was obviously trade was going pretty well under Gresham's cautious eye. And the other thing was that Antwerp got into serious trouble with the wars of religion in Northern Europe. In particular, at this time, the Low Countries, as we would have to call them, were occupied by Spain. And Antwerp is one of the cities in the Low Countries which is sacked by the Spanish army, not because of some kind of reprisal, but because the Spanish crown had omitted to pay its forces, so they took it into their own hands to help themselves. And the Antwerp Bourse really didn't recover at a time that the London Exchange had already opened. So Gresham actually brought a lot of the trade back to London. And of course, this is the age of the merchant adventurers, the Muscovy Company, trade going as far as Turkey and North Africa. And this gives a proper home for all this trade which is going on.
You've got an interesting tale to tell us about the Royal Exchange, haven't you? Because
Well,
he
the Royal
built
Exchange
that
is yes.
and
Well,
got conned.
even Gresham, even Sir T himself got caught out on this one because he invited good Queen Bess to come and open it. And we know this happened because at Gresham College, we still have the tablecloth which was used on that occasion, and it
Right.
is very ornate. But good Queen Bess looked at this building, stood on the steps and said, "I hereby name this the Royal Exchange." And poor old Gresham had to stand there with a fixed smile because he was calling it Gresham's Exchange.
So she said you can have a street instead, did she?
Well, yes. There are all sorts of Greshams here and there. There's
Yeah.
even a Gresham village in Norfolk, but of course that predates the family.
Yeah. 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 Now, so the Gresham Society gets underway. It's alleged that he gifted his house after his wife died. Yes.
Yes, now what happened, it's not the society, which is actually quite recent. Gresham College,
Yeah.
he left the provision for it in his will when he died in 1579. But his wife wasn't having any of that, and she spent almost the next 20 years going as far as Parliament to get the will overturned, because she had been a widow when she married Sir Thomas, and she had two sons by the previous marriage. Whereas Thomas had a very promising son, Richard, who fell off his horse at the age of, I think it was 19. So there was no direct heir. And however, Lady Anne didn't succeed in all of these pleadings, and so she died in 1596, and the college opens in 1597. And yes, it does open in, when I say Gresham's house, again, think of an Uxbridge college that's got, it's got a quadrangle, and it's got colonnades down the side, looking to a certain extent the original Royal Exchange itself. Incidentally, there are lots of pictures available online if you want to see the growth of the Royal Exchange, or indeed of Gresham's properties.
Mm.
And he had laid down, I'll have to look at my notes for this, as part of the new learning, he wanted the City of London Corporation to support astronomy, divinity, obviously, geometry, meaning maths, and music, which of course was quite a vocational subject at the time. The Mercers Company were to offer law, physics, by which he meant medicine, and rhetoric, very important to be able to put your story across. And as I say, the focus on astronomy, geometry, and physics laid the foundations for the Royal Society, which of course survives to this day, and actually started up not long after the foundation of the college.
So was that a breakaway, the Royal Society, from the existing Gresham College setup? Or?
I thought about this, but not really. Gresham College was set up to deliver lectures in English and Latin, incidentally, for the foreign audience, which is quite an odd thought,
Mm.
and only the 7 subjects. Whereas when Christopher Wren and his chums, like Henry Briggs, who became the first professor of maths at Oxford, someone like Edmund Gunter, all the surveyors were below Gunter's chain, for example, and of course Robert Hooke, who is a key character. And this is all in the Reformation. It's after the Great Fire. Gresham's been going for what, 23, no, a bit more than that, 43 years, and isn't flourishing. The professors are sort of settled in very comfortably. One or two of them are settled in so comfortably they refuse to leave, and it's not really going as well as it might. And so Christopher Wren and his chums meet in his room in November 1660, and they decided to form this wonderful organisation called the College for the Promoting of Physico-Mathematical Philosophical Learning. Mathematical and philosophical, both spelt with 2 L's. Funnily enough, this comes to the attention of Charles II, because of course this is the year of the Restoration. He's looking for things with his name on, like Good Queen Bess did. And by 1663, they have a royal charter, and thank goodness it's being called the Royal Society of London for Improving Natural Knowledge. Now, here, really, I think almost more important than Wren and the other professors is Robert Hooke. And he's another underestimated figure from this period, because he is actually the city surveyor. And when it comes to the Great Fire, he is actually the man who redesigns a lot of the square mile following the Great Fire of London. Wren, of course, is building, I think it was 51 churches, and of course St Paul's Cathedral, which is ready by 1711. And Hooke is the one who sets up the experiments. Charles II laughs at all of this because he says they spent all their time trying to do things like measure air. Ha ha ha, how ridiculous. Not realising, of course, that this is the foundation of things like oxygen. And Hooke, being a very practical man, if you imagine his greatest work, and still referred to today, is the Micrographia. And this is a whole book of microscopic drawings. I say microscopic because he built his own microscope and then started doing things like drawing the eye of a fly.
Good
In
heavens.
every it is anatomically totally correct. And that actually is a picture which crops up in textbooks even today. Now, people just ask themselves bright questions as what were called natural philosophers. So, why does air burn? So what is it that causes it to burn? The whole of the phlogiston theory, which was around at the time. And of course, they then turned to Robert Hooke and said, can you set this up for us? They tried a blood transfusion on a dog, which is an idea which was well ahead of its time. And the one I like most is, as we know, there are no snakes in Ireland. And it's a well-known fact to all Irishmen that St. Patrick himself drove them out, whereupon they went to New York and became policemen. And so that's a good one, isn't it? So in order to find out the truth of Ireland being immune from snakes, because if you could then export soil from Ireland to islands in the West Indies that do have snakes, perhaps you could drive the snakes out. So it's quite a serious topic. So they're sent over to Ireland for a bucket of earth. They picked up a passing snake, dropped him into the bucket to see what happened. And of course, nothing did. But the principle is the one laid down by Sir Francis Bacon. You observe, you have a hypothesis, you test it, and you draw a conclusion. So it is a bit of a silly example, but the thinking behind it was quite serious. And of course, the Royal Society does go from strength to strength, and it is there today and has some wonderful people belonging to it, including a couple of members of Gresham College.
Now, we agreed the Gresham College, the third one, the other two being Oxford and Cambridge, but it's over the years sort of changed the way it operates, and therefore it's now a method of providing knowledge to people without them actually having to attend universities. Would that be fair to say?
I tell you, it's a wonderful place to be a fellow. We have no students and no exams. I tell you, that's why I've stayed there so long. No, curious enough, I checked up today. Last year, we had 8,256 people coming to the college in Holborn at Barnard's Inn Hall, but online we had 6.47 million, and that is worldwide.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, in the 17th century, they actually had this concept of the invisible college. And you do see some rather funny pictures of a building with wings on it to show that knowledge spreads. It can't be held in any one place. And curiously enough, today Gresham is really doing what was intended, 300-400 years ago.
Yeah, but the internet's made it possible.
Oh, yes, yes. And it has become a sort of major presence. That also means, of course, one of our most valuable assets is that we record all of our lectures, and we now have 2,000 available online, covering far more topics than just the traditional ones. But there is something for everybody. And every year we do get eminent speakers coming to do a one-off. So if you want to see a lecture from anybody ranging from the Archbishop of Canterbury to the head of the World Bank, you will find something is there which is of value.
And it's there for everybody, and it's free of charge.
Absolutely. The one good thing about Sir Tom, considering what a freebooter he was, he stipulated quite firmly, and believe you me, one or two people have tried to have second thoughts about this, the lectures must be delivered free of charge, and they must be open to the public.
Yeah.
I have to say, Barnard's Inn Hall is not quite as large as it might be, so we can't get as many people in face to face, though it is quite an experience coming up against some really eminent speakers. I've mentioned the members of the Royal Society, for example, and you can sit there in this hall and ask them direct questions to get a direct answer. Everyone else can come in, of course, online. The lectures we have recorded include the questions and answers.
Now, tell me, how does your role as chairman of the Gresham Society fit in with the college?
Well, it's very straightforward. We are the supporters club.
Right.
So our professors are appointed for periods of between 3 and 5 years, normally. We have visiting fellows who might come for 1 or 2 years. And once they've finished their term of office, they can join the Gresham Society. And we have a whole range of people. If you like, I can read it out for you.
Yeah,
we have
go
4
on.
ex-vice-chancellors, 4 heads of house from Oxford or Cambridge, 59 Gresham professors and fellows, 12 professors from other places, 14 assorted knights and dames, 4 lords and ladies, 8 clerics ranging from bishops to Jesuits, 2 senior military officers, and 3 King's Council. So if you want an interesting conversation, you can always find one there.
Well, a pretty comprehensive list of people, definitely from that point of view. So as the supporters club, are you involved in actually booking any of the lectures, or how does that work?
No, the lectures are organised through staff at the college.
Yeah,
The particular value I find for the Gresham Society is if we come on to the Lord Mayor's lectures, and I
yeah.
say to myself, oh, who could give a good lecture on medicine, for example, or contemporary problems of law? I've got the membership to draw on. We do have a fair number of the professors taking part during the course of this year.
Yeah. And so the society has got a connection with the City of London, and so we must now go on to the subject of the Lord Mayor's lectures for 2024.
Yes,
Good friend
yes.
Michael Marnelli, Connect to Prosper, the Knowledge Miles in the World's Coffee House, up and coming lectures. Well, of course, Lloyd's of London started in a coffee house, didn't it?
Well, the thing was about the coffee houses that they got to be known as penny universities
Yeah,
because at the time, we're talking 17th, 18th century really, if you wanted the news, you would go to a coffee house to read one of the papers. You go to exchange information. If even there was something like a ship reported missing, you go to the particular coffee house which became Lloyd's of London to see if there was any news. And this idea of drawing everybody in together, this is Michael's particular theme for the year, because again, I have to read these off, reel these off. In and around London, we have 40 learned societies, 70 universities, and 130 research institutions not far away, plus that unique contribution to knowledge in the City of London, the 112 livery companies, which cover every topic you can imagine.
yeah. So that gives you an idea of how the whole thing works. And the livery companies are unique to London, aren't they?
As large and influential an organisation as we have, then yes.
Yeah,
But a lot of cities around England, Scotland, Glasgow has them as well. On the continent, find them in Switzerland, Austria. You'll even find some in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. They go back to the Middle Ages, and some claim to go back before 1066, whereby people in the same trade would club together to promote the trades of their industry, to oversee the training of apprenticeships, to maintain quality, and they also operated as an early form of charity and as a burial society, which in medieval times, of course, was very important. Now, they really fell out of practical use. As the City of London became so large, it was impossible for a livery company in the square mile to control the trade across the country. Although my livery company, the Stationers, actually for a very long time controlled the printing presses in cities across the whole country. And they had the right to go and smash up a printing press, which belonged to someone who was not a member of the company. But obviously this can't last forever. They tend to go into abeyance in the 19th century. They do become rather sort of dining clubs without an awful lot of purpose. There are several inquiries in the 19th century because, of course, they have their money going back to back to medieval times. They are really very wealthy. Not in some cases, a fair number actually go under, only to be reformed in the 20th century. But then there is it's after the Second World War that they come together. Quite a lot of, I think possibly most of the livery halls had been bombed or damaged. Stationers' Hall was out of operation for 17 years, for example. And there was a deliberate attempt to get people together, really for the same purposes that they'd always been there for. And so, for example, yes, you've got the historical companies, the Bowyers and the Fletchers might be seen as rather old-fashioned, for example, but obviously they've got opportunities for linking in with the military. But if you look, say, at the Horners, horn, very cheap material for things like knife handles. What do we use today? Plastics. What do they support? The plastics and polymers industries.
yeah.
If you look at the fan makers, not much demand for ladies' fans, but there's plenty of demand for things like fans in turbines or in central heating units. So they've modernised and updated themselves. And that leads into a big area of work for the livery companies, of course, which is education. Again, at the Stationers, we have an academy. We have Saturday schools for primary school children who haven't yet met the levels required for English and maths to go to secondary school. And this is replicated right the way across the livery movement.
It's quite something, and in many ways, it holds the fabric of the city of London together, doesn't it?
Oh yes, it does. There's a whole life to it. Yes, there's a cheerful rivalry, especially for things like money, between the different companies. But then you get people coming together for everything from supporting the Lord Mayor, who has to belong to at least one livery company, and usually is an honorary fellow of half a dozen. They appear in the Lord Mayor show, for example, and then they, of course, have to vote for sheriffs and mayor in Common Hall. So there's the sort of official work which goes on, and at the same time, um, there's been a recent movement, say the last 7 years, where companies with a common interest, say cloth, will club together and see whether they can sort of increase their power and influence in their particular trades by actually collaborating. The group I like most, and which I think illustrates this, is the Wet 10. This includes everybody from the farmers who need a lot of clean water and the launderers who produce a lot of dirty water. So they have a common interest in the ecology, for example, and that draws in a range of other companies as well.
Now, are you going to tell us about some of the up and coming lectures that you've got in connection with Knowledge Miles?
Well, I say the first thing we want to do is to illustrate the sheer range of things which go on. Yes, we say, oh, City of London, business, finance. But Michael, in some research last year, discovered that there are more companies in the square mile relating to science and technology than there are relating to business and finance. So one of the things we're doing with delivery companies, if you think of the Salters, for example, who relate in particular to chemistry, then they can pick up on a subject which will explain to people not only the work being done by a company like the Salters, what they're doing in the City of London, but also the importance of that particular range of industries. And this also means that we can illustrate a lot of aspects of the City of London which are sometimes overlooked. It's a major centre for religion. Everybody knows St Paul's Cathedral, but then you've got 31 Wren churches, which are an absolute beauty, well worth visiting, for example. The City of London Police Force runs the National Fraud Investigation Bureau. So they're looking at, and they're building up a lot of expertise in that particular field. In fact, funnily enough, if you go down Fleet Street, there is a massive hole in the ground over on the right-hand side, down at the far end. This is going to be Salisbury Square, where the Corporation of the City of London is drawing together all of the different aspects of the law which are dotted around the city. So you've got the magistrates' courts, you've got the police stations, you've got the fraud centre there as well, and bringing in the law courts, because the law courts, which we have the magistrates' courts, are really rather out of date. So again, you can see the way in which, yes, there are livery companies relating to legal matters. You've got the Corporation of the City of London, which runs the Old Bailey. Don't let's forget the Central Criminal Court. And the Old Bailey is run by two sheriffs, and one of those is going to be Lord Mayor next year. So you see the way this all interweaves. You can't really take out one part without having to take into account the other part. Like, for example, the 4 Inns of Court. If you're a barrister, you must belong to one of those.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting about the sheriffs, because of course Michael did a double stint, didn't he, because of COVID?
He and Chris Hayward were the only two since the 13th century to have to go and
Yes.
do it twice. And it is pretty much a full-time job. I'm pleased to say that I was invited to lunch once, and I did the guided tour once, and there's a lot of organisation that's needed.
It's quite something, isn't it? The way in which it works, the Old Bailey, is quite incredible. So the new development's not going to be too far away from it, is it?
No, I mean, this is the whole idea. It's funny you say the square mile. Literally, it is the old Roman city. You can see the walls in different parts. Underneath the Church of St Martin within Ludgate, and actually underneath Stationers' Hall, we do have a piece of Roman wall in our foundations. So it does focus this idea that you've got so many people working closely together. Now, Michael, for example, one of his, if you go on his website, he's got a lot of initiatives going for one man for 1 year, so we're all having to pile in and help. He's got the coffee collar quiz. And what he's done is to take the key targets of the United Nations, everything running from, I don't know, children's health to the environment, and getting groups of interested people coming in together to talk about those particular topics.
Yeah.
Again, this is the idea. We're all buzzing around in the city of London. Half of us don't know each other. No reason why we should. So what do? You go for an early morning meeting at the Mansion House, and you meet like-minded people. And that's a really important part, I think, of the work that he's doing.
And he's also keen on clearing up junk in space, isn't he?
This is a wonderful one, yes. I mean, talk about reach for the stars. The plan is to have an insurance policy so that if what goes up doesn't come down, you start to create a fund for the destruction, really, or for the demolition of the, is it millions of pieces of space junk now? It's some fantastic amount.
Oh,
and of course, the more there is,
yeah,
it's staggering, isn't it? The more there is, the more likely the chance that they're going to bump into each other.
yeah,
If that
collisions,
happens to go through
yeah,
collisions,
yeah.
and they're going what 17,000 miles an hour or something. So it's something which has been left for too long, and Michael is driving this one very hard.
And the other concern is, of course, there are human beings on the space station the whole time. So you know, you want anything to thump into that.
Danger.
Yeah, very much.
Well,
so.
I would say if this were happening on the ground, something would have been done a lot sooner.
Yeah.
So good for Michael. He's leading the rush.
Yeah. Well, with that,
and of course, we have astronomy lectures at Gresham College.
With that, Tim, I'm afraid we've run out of time. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you, and I would like to thank you so much for, you know, sparing me the time, given your current discomfort, and we all hope that you'll be, you know, fit and well fairly shortly.
Oh, well, thank you. This takes my mind off other things. Just to say, you can find the Lord Mayor's lectures on the Gresham Society website or on knowledgemiles.net. And of course, Gresham College is just www.gresham.ac.uk. It's all up there if you look for it.
That's super. That's super. Thank you so much, Tim.
A pleasure.